Hey, welcome to this week's Into the Lair. Like I said last week, we're going to do several shows on vocals. And so this show, we're at the Boom Boom Room, Will Smith Studio. We're talking with Andrew Wuepper and Brian Beloved Thomas, and a part of the Red Zone team. They are. That sounded like Yoda, didn't it? A part of the Red Zone team. They are. Anyway. We're missing part of the team. Cook Carell, who's a vital part of the team, he records vocals and produces vocals. Incredible vocal producer, and is a good producer in his own right too. I guess I'm an honorary member of the Red Zone camp, right? Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Just want to make sure I didn't lose my Red Zone card.
No.
Do you have different thought processes for different genres and different genders?
Absolutely.
Just take me through that real quick, B.
Well, basically, I always have a basic mic setup. Mic selection can go anywhere between vintage to what's going on right now to the newer like C800 Sony, back to vintage Telefunken 251, which is one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
The U47, classic go-to. If I have one available, I'm using it.
Right.
But you still got to listen to them because, you know, some of them get beat up. There's been times where, like, it's a 47, why does my vocal sound like this? It's not my set, mic pre or whatever, it's the mic.
Is there a microphone that you guys use that would shock the world and everybody would say, I would have never thought they used that on vocals?
We use U87 on a lot of stuff, especially like rap vocals. Like B was saying, some of the vintage mics tend to get beat up really badly sometimes, especially with vocalists who have really powerful voices that carry.
Mm-hmm.
They can really, really crush the diaphragm of that microphone.
Carrie.
Like power in their
Carrie. I
voice.
thought you were talking about Mariah Carey.
No.
Well, she might be one too.
She is one. If you don't have the right mic on her, you're just gonna crap out the diaphragm.
Yeah. Sometimes you need a mic that can really take a beating. So U87, as long as your gain structure is good, mind your surroundings, mind the acoustics, mind the gain staging, and even with the cheaper mic like a U87, you can get a good tone out of it, and you won't have to be constantly monitoring the position of the vocalist to the microphone because in some cases they do tend to blow out that mic with a more sensitive mic like a 251 or a U47.
What is your preamp of choice? Do you guys tend to use the same preamp all the time, or is there a go-to preamp, or do you have different preamps you like?
Well, I basically use a few different ones, but my favorite is going to be the Neve. Like
the 1070,
the 1073 or the 1081. I mean, I can deal with the 1073 most because I don't EQ that much to tape. If anything, I might roll off a little bit of low end, but not too much. Just something I hear.
What you would?
Definitely the 1073. Sometimes we may use a Crane Song Flamingo. We use that a couple times with Kook and his engineer Josh, who's incredible too.
Yeah, I think the 1073 these days is probably the. It
like
just works. It colors, has the right color, has the right characteristics.
And it's great for instruments too because it has a direct in. So I use a lot of guitars through it.
Break down what you guys mean by gain structure and how you manipulate that to get the sound you want.
Well, basically on, let's say for instance on like a 251 mic, just generally that's what I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
What I'll do, I'll have the artist go in the room. Of course, the track's playing so they can just start hearing themselves. And I don't have anything set up because I don't know what they're going to do until they get in there. It just, I might know the song, so their vocal might come in really loud, so I'm not compressing yet.
So you're always ready to, whatever they sing,
I'm adjusting on the fly. I never use presets because I can't because I start coloring my songs all the same way. Whatever song that is, it needs to sound like this. I'm adjusting on the fly all the time.
All the time.
You too,
every section.
Absolutely. And section to section too, like he said. You're obviously not going to be recording a really intimate, maybe breathier, quiet vocal the same way as, Christina belting in a vamp. Like, you're going to have to adjust. You have to ride the compressor, ride the threshold on the compressor, because in some of those quieter spaces, you may be setting your compressor to a certain level, and it may be right, and then when she starts wailing, you're going to be, killing all the dynamics in that vocal performance. So you constantly have to be adjusting, constantly have to be writing, constantly have to be thinking about the performance of the record and how the record changes from section to section.
Cool.
So very important to do that when you're recording. Recording vocals is never a set it and forget it process ever.
Like a rotisserie.
Yeah, and keeping going with the gain structure thing. there is a kind of a common misconception out there for in the schools, recording schools, and younger engineers who are coming up, that you have to record your levels to Pro Tools as hot as possible without clipping. That's absolutely untrue. Maybe in a 16-bit recording world that was more true, but now that we're in a 24-bit recording world, you could set your levels pretty moderate into Pro Tools. You have a lot of dynamic range and bit depth to work with within your gain structure. So, set your level to your mic pre conservative, and then maybe use your output gain of your compressor to use that to do the actual gain staging into Pro Tools. But keep it moderate, you don't have to be recording super hot. Keep it nice in the middle, just listen for it and trust your ears. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing biggest piece of advice is just trust your ears and trust your instincts.
My ears are a little larger than B's. Does that mean I'm a better engineer than B?
You might be able to cover more ground.
You guys have been involved with a lot of different genres.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice a different mic placement, mic this, mic that, with, like, say, if you're working on a rock project as opposed to, like, say, because you guys do everything from rock to Celine Dion.
Absolutely.
To rap, to everything.
It is absolutely a difference. A lot of times we will, like B was mentioning earlier, we may have a chain that we start out with. Like the classic chain we use is the Neve 1073, the TubeTech CL1B compressor, which is a great tube compressor, my favorite for vocals. And then we'll go out of that into an Apogee Rosetta 800. We'll go in analog and then come out digital into Pro Tools, and that's how we do our A to D conversion.
On the Rosetta, do you use any of the built-in limiting or compressing? Or
Absolutely not. Not when we're recording.
Not when you're recording.
The soft limit on those is sort of kind of like, it's kind of like its own built-in L2, and when you're recording vocals, we're trying to get the least amount of compression. Like, we want dynamics, and if we need to control the dynamics after the fact, we can do that after the fact, but we never like to record with too much compression ever. Maybe a dB or two at the most.
Okay. What's your start off attack and release times? Do you know them in milliseconds, or you just know them by just where the knob goes?
I just go by
where the knob is.
But generally, you're in the 100 to 200 millisecond range on the attack.
Pretty, moderate on both.
It also depends on the type of vocal performance you're capturing. If it's a rap vocal, then you may need a little bit faster attack. If it's depending on how much of the peaks and the dynamics you want to control, if you want the vocal to be really, really dynamic, you may set a slower attack time. It just really depends on the vocal performance you're capturing. If I hear something audibly in the compression that's bothering me, when we start out, then it may prompt me to make a decision to change something, but normally we don't really change those two knobs right there.
And B, what ratio do you tend to use?
When I start out, I keep it around
3-to-1?
about 3-to-1, but I usually dial it down.
Down meaning 2 to
about
1?
2 to 1 to sometimes even. Well, with the CL1B, it's really sensitive.
It's a very transparent compressor too,
and it doesn't.
What are you listening for when you make the decision to dial it to a
Well, I like
ratio?
because we're going not to tape. We're going Pro Tools. And the dynamic range on the tape was just so much more forgiving. The distortion sounded a lot better, and when you hit tape a little bit harder. But with this, I just want the actual vocal to be really untouched. It's just I use light compression on it just because I don't want to take away from it. So that's why I do a lot of the gain staging on different sections. I'm like, okay, she's gonna be loud here. We'll do that section here.
Right.
But sometimes I get the artist that wants to sing all the way through. So I'm like, shit, now I got to get in there and set something. And then, that's of course a different.
By the way, the S word is a technical term. Don't feel that was cussing. For you project studio guys, you guys that might be working in your home project studio, what advice would you give them in terms of like say they're setting up a mic in their room? How would you approach that?
Listen to the space you're recording in, please.
Listen
Absolutely.
for reflections. Listen to see what the room sounds like.
So you guys are listening to the reflections in the
reflections. See if the room's really tight. See if the room's live.
You listen for everything.
Everything. You just.
When you're recording, obviously, everything starts at the source. You know, what are you recording?
The source being the singer.
The source being the singer. And I see, some people make the mistake of, they set up the microphone, they walk in the control room, they start listening, start getting levels, and then, maybe they may be hearing some problematic things, and they automatically go to the equipment. Okay, what's wrong with the equipment? What's wrong with this? Without even going into the space and listening to what's going on in there. You could go into any room, and you may have, some that metallic ping sound. There could be an air conditioning vent. There could be some fluttering echoes in there. You never know. So it's very, very important to go into the room and listen.
This is the end of part 1. If you'll tune in next week, we will show you part 2 of our really good interview with Andrew and B. So next week, part 2.
Thanks for having us, Dave.
Oh, no trouble
It's
at
a
all.
pleasure, Dave.